for turning to 10. This is Southern New England's news leader.
Rhode Island's aging roads, water systems, even public buildings are all in need of repair and improvement. And the state set up a bank to help pull together money to take care of those needs. It's called the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. Its CEO is my guest this week on 10 News Conference.
NBC 10 News Conference begins right now.
And thank you for joining us. I'm Bill Rappleye. My guest, Jeff Diehl, CEO of the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Now, the Infrastructure Bank used to be known as the Clean Water Finance Agency.
That's correct.
And so it's been around for a number of decades. But in this new iteration, it's only 3 years old
About
now?
3 years, yeah.
And the difference between what it is now and what it was is?
Well, we have an expanded mandate. The Clean Water Finance Agency has been around for 30 years. It's our 30th birthday next year. We'll have to have a celebration. But about 3 years ago, the governor and the treasurer had a vision about how they could expand investment into local infrastructure. They worked with the General Assembly to rename the agency into the Infrastructure Bank, but more importantly, expand our mandate from, we used to do water, clean water, which is wastewater, sewage, drinking water. We had a couple of programs for homeowners in those space, but they expanded our mandate to do municipal road and bridge, energy portfolio. So we do energy in public sector buildings. We provide for energy efficiency and renewable projects. We invest in business energy efficiency and renewables, and we're looking at residential. And we also have a brownfield remediation fund. So really in four sectors: water, energy, roads and bridge, and brownfields.
And so you're a bank. You're a quasi-public agency.
We're a quasi-public agency.
So the bank is just a title. It's not really a legal definition.
Yeah, it's a name. In fact, our statute says that we aren't a bank, but that's kind of splitting hairs. But we do operate like a bank. We borrow money in the bond markets and we lend money on the other side. So we're really like a wholesale bank. We don't take deposits, although if you wanted to buy some of our bonds, you'd certainly be welcome through your broker. But we borrow money in the markets. We get some capital from the state. We get some capital from the federal government. And we borrow really 4 to 5 times what we get in capital from the private sector.
Now, I always thought of it as being a revolving fund, but in fact, you do get money out of the state?
Well, we're not a line budget item from the state, so we get some capital from different sources. In our water programs, we get capital from the federal government. In fact, they've just increased our allocation by $6 million. The state has to match that by 20%. And then we go out and we borrow multiple of that in the bond market. So we get roughly $20 million, we'll get in the next year, $20 million from the feds, we get 20% from the state, but we'll be able to leverage that significantly. In fact, Rhode Island is #1 in the country in leveraging that money. So we borrow 4 to 5 times private sector capital that we put into our investments.
But where does the state come up with the 20%?
It comes from a variety of sources. In our water programs, it comes from really bonding authority. So the green bond that has been submitted to the Assembly and hopefully will be on the ballot this fall will create a little over $6 million for the next 2 years. But that leverages $44, $45 million in federal money. But we take that $50 million and we convert it into $250 to $300 million worth of investments over the next 2 years. In our road and bridge, it comes from some of the bonds that they do. Our energy efficiency and renewable program called the Efficient Building Fund, where we lend for public sector buildings and schools. That comes from what's called a system benefit charge, and that's on everybody's electric bill. And that's, we get a small portion of that to invest into energy projects for cities and towns.
So you get $50 million, you turn it into 450, you said?
About 300 million.
So how's that work? I mean, is it any different than borrowing money?
Well, it is effectively what we're doing, is we're borrowing money and then we're lending all of that capital. So the revolving fund really means is that when money comes back to us on the repayment of the loans, and the bank has never, in its 30 years, has never had a default on our loans to municipalities, we take that money and we redeploy it into more loans. So it continues to grow. So the amount that we have, the capital that comes in every year, the amount that we borrow in the bond markets from private sector lenders, and the recycled capital that comes in on a revolving basis gets put back out into more loans.
And the money is cheaper than money I'd get from a bank?
Yes, I mean, we borrow as a AAA in the markets. We're the best credit. And we lend at a level to municipalities below their market rates. And it depends on the program. It's anywhere from a 20 to 35% reduction in interest rate where if they went out to the market. I can give you an example. We just closed some loans to 4 communities for sewer projects. Big one in Warren, a couple of other communities. We saved them over $4 million if they had gone out and borrowed the money on their own. So we have the capacity to borrow at a lower rate and then lend that money and lend our capital to help communities lower the cost of their infrastructure investments.
So that's the bottom line. That's what you're out to do.
That's what we're there to do, is to save money, to make it cheaper.
Because of your ability to sell bonds?
Well, it's a capacity. It's both the ability to sell the bonds and the capital that we get that comes in.
Right. The federal government just gives you money if you come up with 20%.
If the state matches 20%, that's the key to unlock the federal money, and then we borrow money in the bonds, in the bond market. Mm-hmm. And and we get the capital that comes in when people pay back their loans.
But when you talk about leveraging more money, that means banks can then join into the program? I mean, how's the 50 turned into 300?
Well, we go out and we borrow money from the bond market, so from institutional investors, individuals like yourselves and others that buy our bonds, and we take that money and we lend it out to municipalities, the local cities and towns, and other agencies.
Oh, so when you say you're able to leverage it into more money, that's by selling bonds?
Yes.
So how many bonds have been sold in the last 3 years?
In the last 3 years, I'd say we've probably sold somewhere in the region of 150 million of bonds.
Mm-hmm. And this isn't dependent on a voter referendum or anything like that?
No, and the state's not on the hook for any of ours. The way that our transactions work is we take our loans and we secure our borrowings with our loans. And so, we neither are a budget item from the state, nor do we create any risk for the state from a repayment basis. Mm-hmm. So, the bonds that we sell, the credit of those is based on the infrastructure bank and the loans that we're making.
So, is this common in other states? Are
Yes.
there lots of infrastructure banks around?
There's, in the state revolving funds, every state has one. So ours just has a broader mandate than many of the other states, and because we do have the roads and bridge, the energy, and the brownfields.
And when you're doing roads and bridges, this is not stepping on the toes of the DOT?
No, we only work with local municipalities. So we don't finance the state. We don't do anything on state roads. We're just working with municipalities to lower the cost for them to repair roads and bridges in their communities.
Oh, I see. So when we heard a few years ago Providence wanted to go out for a $40 million bond to repave its roads, you could step in and do that kind of a loan at a lower rate? That's
actually what we did last fall. They were going to sell $45 million of infrastructure bonds to the market, to investors, and we called them up and asked them what they were going to spend it on. They told us it was going to be about $22 million worth of road work. We reminded them that we had a road and bridge program and we could offer them a rate that was 33% less than what they went to market. Now, at the time, we didn't have enough capital on the bank's balance sheet or in the road and bridge program to do all $22 million, but we committed to lend them $10 million, and we saved them $1.6 million versus what they could have done if they'd gone to the bond market.
So, do the other municipalities in the state know about you?
We believe so. But that's part of, when I came in a couple of years ago, the agency bank was fairly sleepy. We received applications every year for loans, and to a certain degree, we were a bit surprised by what came in. What we've done over the last couple of years is we've completely changed our business model to be much more proactive and customer-centric. So we're out meeting all the time with cities and towns to find out what is their capital investment plans for the next few years, the medium term, long term. That helps us understand, where can we add value, Where might we want to modify some of our programs to be more responsive to cities and towns' needs in infrastructure investment? And also planning for the long term. Are there new programs that we might want to create that can meet that demand? In fact, next week is National Infrastructure Week, and we're planning a number of events across the state, I think close to 20. We'll do roundtables in different areas around the state where we'll have town officials, business owners, other stakeholders to discuss infrastructure investment. And that's what we're trying to do, is be responsive and get the word out so that we don't have to make those calls. The calls come into us and say, how can you help us?
We'll talk a little bit more about Infrastructure Week after we take a commercial break. I'll continue my conversation with Jeff Diehl, who's from the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank.